Hello YouTube, W&J's Handy Dad here, and today we're going to change out the transmission fluid and filter on my 2010 Crown Vic P7B. Now you see the first thing to do is to drive it up on some ramps on the rear tires. Alternatively, of course, you can jack up the rear and put it on jack stands. I feel like the ramps makes it quicker and easier. Next thing is, of course, to let everything cool down before you get under the vehicle. You don't want to touch a hot catalytic converter or anything like that because you can get burned. You need to make sure you get the right fluid for your vehicle. 2009 and up uses Mercon LV. 2008 and older uses Mercon V. You cannot interchange those, so make sure you get the right fluid for your vehicle. Also, yes, I'm using an AC Delco transmission filter, the TF302. I've used it in every Crown Victoria I've ever had, and all of them have worked out perfectly, so I'm sticking with what works. To do a pan drop fluid change, you're going to need approximately 6 quarts of transmission fluid, give or take a little bit. If you're doing a flush, you may need as many as 15 to 18 quarts. Now, a flush is not called for in any of the service manuals, simply a pan drop change with the filter change. They recommend changing the fluid every 30,000 miles, so that being your fluid change being the 6 quarts that come out when you drop the pan. Now, this 2010 is the first Crown Vic I've ever had that did not already have a drain plug on the transmission, so I'm going to be adding this one. It's just a universal drain plug. I've added it on other vehicles before. Seems to work very well, and if you have always had to change your transmission fluid by dropping the pan, this makes it a lot easier to just drain out some fluid and change it. Obviously, it doesn't replace changing the filter, but when you just need to change out some fluid, it makes it so much easier. And because this vehicle is an unknown, as in I just got it, has almost 140,000 miles, and I don't know how well they've kept up the transmission changes. After I do the pan drop and the filter change, I'm going to drive it a little bit, and then I'm going to drain out as much as will come out of that drain plug and refill it again. So I'm going to try to get about 12 quarts through this vehicle. This is not a scientific test by any means, but if you pull your dipstick and you get a white towel, you can kind of see the color of the fluid. You see mine is kind of a brownish color, so that tells me this fluid is probably at least a little bit worn. Now, it's not blackened to the point to where I would say just leave it alone and know that you're going to have to replace transmission, but it's not as pink or red as I would like it to be. So I'm hoping after putting about 12 quarts in, I'll get a much better color out of it. So there's your transmission pan. It should be held on with 10mm bolts. They torque to 12 to 16 foot-pounds. So I usually go 15. Not quite splitting the difference, but the main thing is getting them all equal pressure so there's no warping and no leaking. The other thing is you want to make sure that your cats aren't hot. Wait till your cats are cool before starting. You can jack the front of the vehicle up too. Just remember, safety is key here, so you want to make sure your vehicle is secure. It's not going to fall or tip over or be pushed off of your jacks or anything. So in my case, I've got the front wheels chalked, the back up on the drive-up ramps, and I should be able to get in here and at least get this started. But if I can't, then I'll jack up the side a little bit. We've got our drain pan in place. We've got some extra material around it because when you're dropping the transmission pan, it's very messy and the fluid can go all over the place. So even if you have a very large collection pan, it still can spill over. So I've got extra stuff on the ground to catch anything that misses the drain pan. Going to remove the front bolts from the transmission pan completely, and then work my way towards the back, loosening them a little bit. Now sometimes just removing one bolt or even loosening a bolt can get the fluid coming out, so you need to be ready. And other times you can loosen all of them and nothing happens until you start removing the very last bolt. So it's really hard to predict. You just need to be prepared for anything and just know that fluid can start coming out at any time. And then there's the transmission pan. It has bolts all the way around it. So you can see when you get down to the last two bolts, most of the fluid will be running out of the front of the drain pan, or the transmission pan, into your drain. And then when you carefully remove the back two bolts and then hold it up and maneuver it to where you dump as much fluid as you can into the drain pan, then leave the drain pan underneath to catch all those drips. And once it's slowed the dripping, then you can take the filter out, and just be prepared when you pull the filter, you're going to get a little sudden gush of fluid usually. So you see I haven't dumped all the fluid out of here yet. I'm waiting for the drips on the car to finish into the drain pan before I dump this. You may find a yellow plug, a little plastic thing in your pan. If you do, that just means you're the first person to ever drop the pan. So I am encouraged by the fact that there's not a yellow plug in here. It tells me they've at least changed this once before. Other thing is, you have a reusable gasket that comes with the Crown Vic. I should say every Crown Vic I've ever seen has it. And you should reuse that gasket rather than using the cork one that comes with your filter. If you don't have this, then obviously you're going to need to use the cork one, but this is a better gasket. So I'm going to just wipe it down and clean it up and go check on the draining and the filter. The other thing you have in your transmission is this magnet, and it needs to get cleaned off as well. It'll have collected any metal particles that have fallen off into your transmission fluid. It is removable from the pan, you just got to get a good hold of it. And you want to clean it up very thoroughly, get all that metal off of it. Maybe even spray it down with brake parts cleaner. But definitely at least wipe it down to where it's clean and shiny, like there's a clean section there, what it should look like when you're done. So there's your transmission without the filter on it. You see it's still dripping, so I'm going to wipe it down. Now I've got to pull the gasket out of the hole over there, because when I pulled the filter, of course the gasket stayed in just like on my 08. And so I'm going to get that out of there, wipe all this down, put some new fluid on the new filter gasket, and then pop the filter back in there. There's the old O-ring or gasket, whatever you want to call it. That's the type of tool I use. So basically I just try to get that up under that lip there and then pop it down. It's not easy, it doesn't just pop right out. I mean, it took me probably 5 minutes to get that out of there, because you're kind of doing it blind. But it must be a law somewhere that these can't stay attached to the filter. So the most logical place to put the drain plug is probably right here. So I'm going to drill a pilot hole first. Drill the final hole. Of course, you need to clean all this metal out, do this another wipe down, and then we'll install the drain plug. 31/64 ended up being the right size for it to basically thread in. I'm guessing if you went to a 1/2" bit, it would probably just push straight through. So it's really up to you. I'm going with the slightly tighter fit. And I can't stress enough how important it is to get that cleaned out, including any metal shavings from you drilling that hole. Next thing you can decide to do is, while you have this off, if you want to paint it, obviously I would recommend a high heat paint. Engine or caliper paint would probably do best. Just take the drain plug, and like I said, it kind of threads in with the 31/64 bit. 3/4 socket, snug that up on there. It comes with a washer and a nut. Now I'm going to put some Loctite so this doesn't come loose. Then I'll need a 3/4 on each side to snug that up. And don't forget to reinstall your magnet. You also will need to make sure that the drain plug is actually closed, and it takes like an Allen key in there. Put this back on the vehicle. So you want to take a dab of new transmission fluid and just put it on the O-ring, and then you're just going to go pop that straight into the transmission, and then you're ready to put your pan back on, bolt it down. Like I said, I typically go 15 foot-pounds on the bolts and then refill it. Help that slide in. It should just pop straight in. And there's your 15 when it clicks. The refill process is pretty straightforward. Put your funnel in the dipstick tube, and I measured that I got at least 5 quarts out. Did that by pouring the drain pan into a recycling bin that holds 5 quarts, filled it up. So I'm going to start by pouring back 5 quarts, and then after that, and you can see how nice and red the new fluid is compared to kind of blackened red color, brownish color of the old fluid. We'll pour 5 quarts in, run the engine, shift through all the gears from park to reverse to neutral to drive to 2 to 1, back to 2, back to drive to neutral to reverse, and then back to park, and then we'll check the fluid on the dipstick. Alright, I drove her around the block. She's shifting great, feels like a new transmission. So obviously it was time for that filter to be changed out. I noticed it was not near as responsive as the Silver Vic, but now it feels the same. So the last thing is just to check, make sure your fluid, you do that with the engine warm, transmission warm, engine running, and transmission in park. said, driving good, shifting good, so I'm not going to mess with it now. I'll probably drive it around for at least a couple days, and then I'll drain out another 5 quarts or so through that newly installed drain plug, and do that until I've used a total of 12 quarts of fluid, and then she should stay running great for a long time. So here's the fluid color after the first change and driving around just a couple days. And here is after 10 quarts run through it. Getting a more red color. Getting about 5 quarts out of the drain hole, so it seems like you can only do 5 at a time unless you figure out a way to, like I said, either run the engine while you're doing it, which I don't like to do anything risky like that, or if you can figure out a way to get it pulling out of the cooler, which I was only able to get just a little bit out. And you want to check, make sure you're not getting any leaks. Ground is clear, so no leaks. Hope the video was helpful. Appreciate thumbs up. Subscribe if you're not already subscribed, and please tell your friends about my channel. Thank you very much.